Hello, viewers. We have in our program today the Father Dever. He'll be speaking to us about Anglicanism and its practices. Father Dever, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Father David. How are you?
Very well, sir. Thank you. I have a couple of questions for you this day. The first would be, the Episcopal Church, is it an Anglican church? If it's an Anglican church, why is it called Episcopal Church, right?
Yes. It's a good question, but before we get to why it's called Episcopal Church, I would like to say a few words about Anglicanism itself.
Great.
And why we call the church the Anglican Church. And many times you hear people say that Anglicanism, that's the church. People, when King Henry wanted to have a divorce and he formed his own church so he could get a divorce and get another wife.
Correct.
And that's not the reality. We are a branch of the Catholic Church, and I will say more about. But let's go back about the beginning of the church itself.
Okay.
According to Stephen Neal, nobody knows when the gospel reached England itself, the British Isles. But what is also known is that in the 3rd century, which means way back, Tertullian referred to the church in the British Isles, which means that Christianity was already there in the British Isles, or in what we call Anglican England, way back as early or even before. It may be the case that soon after the death of the early disciples, or that the gospel had already reached England, so to say, the British Isles. In the 6th century, late 6th century, Pope Gregory commissioned Augustine to go to England or to the British Isle to bring the gospel to them. He was shocked and surprised when he arrived there to find that the faith was already being practiced by the king, by the queen. Actually, the queen was a fervent member of the church. So Rome, so to say, the Bishop of Rome, did not introduce Christianity to England. The church was already there. The credit we should give, though, to the Pope Gregory, is that when Augustine, who was commissioned by him, arrived there, so he commissioned Augustine also to organize so that the church will be more organized under the leadership of Rome.
Okay.
So that's how the connection became from the Church of England, so the church that was in England, and the connection with Rome.
Oh.
So there is a connection that was established by Pope Gregory through sending Augustine in about 593, the 6th century. So the church was there. The point I'm making is that there was already
the church
in England, or of England, prior to that connection with the Roman church, so to say, what we call the Roman Church, or the See of Rome.
The See of Rome, yeah.
There are many factors that came into play when we talk about the formation or the early stages of Anglicanism. It is true that Henry wanted a divorce. At first, Henry was a fervent defender of the Roman Catholic Church in England, or the church in England with its connection with Rome. Henry was also a strong believer in the Bible. It is said, according to Neal again in Anglicanism, Henry was married to Catherine of Aragon. Aragon, who was married to his brother, older brother. When the brother died, Henry was a teenager, was married to the wife of his deceased brother. And he had no say in the matter. He was told, okay, you're gonna marry Catherine of Aragon. And he married her. Or they married him to her, so to say.
Okay.
Because he had no... He could not say yes, he could not say no.
Right.
He was still a boy.
Yes, yes.
And he's that boy now, it was all political. But here's that boy now, who was married to an older woman, but because they wanted to keep the political pact. So, now they could not have children.
And because the lady was older.
But Henry believed that it was because abomination. Because upon reading Leviticus 20, he saw the passage where it says, it is an abomination for someone, in the eyes of the Lord, for someone to marry his brother's wife. And then for men to marry his brother's wife, Leviticus 20:21. And then the passage also continues to say that if such thing happens, if you marry your brother's wife, you will be childless. Henry said, aha! This is why I cannot have
Catherine.
a child with this woman, with Catherine of Aragon, because the Bible forbids me from marrying. It is an abomination. Arrow.
Arrow. You need more language. Arrow. Yeah.
Abomination.
Right.
So he asked the Pope to annul the marriage based on the fact that that's something that was not supposed to take place. You following me?
I do.
At first, the Pope gave him indication like he would do it. But Catherine also was well connected. The Emperor of Spain was a relative of hers. And when he found out that the Pope will allow Henry to let go, to divorce, or for the marriage to be annulled, he said, if you do it, you'll be in trouble with me. So the Pope said, I can't do it. So Henry said, I'm the king in my own empire, in my own kingdom. So decisions, the Pope is not the one making decision for me. The Pope is not making a religious decision. He's making a political decision, which also means that the leader of Spain has control over my life. You follow me?
I do.
The leader of Spain has control
over his life. Yeah.
If you're the king of England, you want a decision of a religious decision, and the Pope indicated that he might grant you that decision, but recanted when the leader of Spain said no. If you do it, you'll be in trouble with me. In other words, it means that what ultimately means is that the leader of Spain has control over what you do in England.
In England, yes.
And then Henry said, that being the case, then I'm gonna move away move the church away from the Pope, because the Pope is not making a religious decision, but a political one. So that's basically some of the backgrounds. There are the factors. But the whole thing about breaking away from the Church of Rome. The Church of Rome, or the Bishop of Rome, was not being faithful in his mandate. The Bishop of Rome was not making a religious decision in dealing with...
He was making a
political decision.
Yes.
And that political decision was impacting Henry as a leader.
In his own kingdom.
In his own kingdom. And that's something he could not accept.
Okay.
So he had Parliament pass a series of decrees and laws to declare him as that in this kingdom, the King Henry makes decision for his kingdom, not the leader of Spain. And eventually, now the Archbishop of Canterbury, Cranmer, was the one who was asked to make a religious decision
in England.
In England. So the religious decision was being made by the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Canterbury being the site where Augustine, the one who was commissioned by Pope, has his see. So the see of Rome, but the see of Canterbury was always the place where the head of the Church of England. So the head of the church, Cranmer, made the decision and allowed Henry to have a wife. Now, when Henry died, his son Edward, who was a young boy, continued, and the reform continued. But when he died, Mary, known as Bloody Mary, who was now daughter of Catherine, had a daughter. No sons, but they had a daughter. Mary became queen and erased everything that the father had done, and killed everyone who worked with the father. So, and took the church back to Rome. And when she died, Elizabeth now, who adored her father. So Catherine hated her father because he divorced her mother. Mary hated her father because he divorced her mother, Catherine. Elizabeth loved her father. So when her older sister died, Mary died, Elizabeth became queen. And she now went back and continued to do what her father was doing. So these are part of the early stages of Anglicanism. But one thing that I want to, and the church went through so many struggles and changes and through the years with the Puritans and so on and so forth. But through it all, the Catholic faith, the apostolic tradition has been kept, meaning that the apostolic tradition is that we can trace the beginning of the church through the apostles.
That's the one we call the apostolic succession?
Succession, not tradition. Apostolic succession. We can trace the origin of the church way back, as far as one can go.
From the apostles?
From the apostles, we can trace the origin of the church. So Anglicanism is not a breakaway church from Rome. The Anglican Church is a church that has survived many centuries and many different movements and struggles, but a church that can trace its origin way back to the apostles. Now, coming to the Episcopal Church, I'm giving you a long answer for.
That's fine. I'm sure our viewers will be glad to know most of the truth that you have reviewed, explaining what Anglican Church stands for.
Yes.
So I think I'm okay with it.
So, now when the settlers from England came, and they came with their religion, usually when people come, usually they come wherever you go, like you come to America, I come to America, we come with our own faith of tradition or way of worship and everything. We do not suddenly come to America and then become different people. We learn in this part of the world as well, but at the same time, we keep a great deal of who we are, right? Our culture. No matter
Correct.
where we go,
Correct.
the culture remains with us.
Yes. Correct.
And we find that, for instance, I'm from Haiti, and then in Haiti, hundreds of years later, we still have so much part of the culture, African culture, still. Actually, it's called, I'm digressing, but I met a guy from Senegal the other day. And he said to me, when I said I'm from Haiti, he said, oh!
You're my brother.
He said, no, he said, no, Haiti, in Senegal, we call Haiti the true Africa. Because everything is so pure there. The culture is still so pure.
Pure in Haiti.
In Haiti. And, but I was digressing to show, but talking about the culture. So when the settlers came, they came with their culture also. And part of the culture, religion is part of that, how we worship. So many of them came with the faith that they had, that was part of who they were in, and they are bringing the Anglican tradition. And they continue to worship in that faith. But there were no bishops. You know, in our tradition, priests came, but a priest is not allowed to ordain other priests. So there were many priests, but that were commissioned to serve here, but there were no bishops. When America gained its independence, we're in a country. There were no bishops to ordain priests, and British bishops would not come here. And Samuel Seabury was elected by the clergy to be the first bishop. But he could not go and obtain consecration in England because of all the changes that were made during the time of Henry. Anyone who was to be consecrated had to pledge allegiance to the king. And as an American,
our bishops then were meant to take a pledge with the King of England, allegiance to the King of England.
But as an American citizen,
you cannot pledge allegiance to any other government.
Government. So it was a non-start. So what they did, they elected Samuel Seabury, and he went to the Scottish Isles and find what is known the non-Jurors, folks who would not pledge allegiance to the king, and those bishops were the one who consecrated Samuel Seabury as the first bishop for the Episcopal Church. Now, the name Episcopal came is that because in America became an independent country, they wanted to keep the religion, but a name that was
different from Britain,
and a name that was properly American. Episcopal means of bishop of church that is held by the episcopate, bishops.
The bishops.
So that's how we get the Episcopal Church. We are not the only Episcopal Church. For instance, when you hear that the Episcopal gathering and the Roman Church at times with the Episcopal gathering of a statement of pronouncement and so on and so forth, that mean by bishops, statements made by bishops. But the Episcopal Church means that it is a church that is headed or by bishops. And bishops who are duly in Julius apostolic succession. So that's why we call it the Episcopal Church.
Thank you, Father. That takes us to the second question. What do you understand by the word low church and high church?
Again, in the Anglican Church, coming back to Anglicanism again, there was always that tension of the folks who were more leaning towards the Protestant tradition, evangelical Protestant tradition of the church, because what we find that after Reformation, you have the churches that became very evangelical and Protestant and felt that they had to do away with vestments and and candles and icons and so on and so forth. And they became extremely, like the Puritans wanted to, in the Church of England, they became like more like the Presbyterians and erasing everything that would remind them of Rome. That's the low church part. Folks and who are more Protestant and are quote unquote Protestant in nature, in the sense that they don't want to do anything that resembles Rome. And you find also in the same Anglican church, there are other folks. For instance, with the Oxford movement in the 19th century, we find the Pusey and the Tractarians who wanted to go back to the Catholic tradition of the church. And the Catholic tradition of the church in worship, the singing of the liturgy and the vestments, and which gives the liturgy the grand aspect of the liturgy that presented as something solemn.
Okay.
So you have incense, and the whole thing is that when we worship as High Church, there is no way we can present something that is worthy enough to God, but we just know that we want something as solemnly as possible. We could never reach the point where it's really perfect, but as solemnly as possible.
Thank you.
To the glory of God.
Thank you, Father. Thank you for the explanation.
So I'm not done yet. So you find that in the low church, more emphasis many times are paid to the preaching and the singing, but the beauty of the liturgy, you said, these are the rituals. We don't need those things. But I believe that a church that embraces both traditions present worship to his perfection as humanly as possible. So when you bring together the glory of the liturgy, all the incense and the lighting and the bells and everything, and at the same time, and from my tradition, the dancing and the drumming, and then you combine all, and it's all to the glory of God. The magnificence of our God, and the more solemn it is, the more we celebrate the magnificence of our God.
Thank you, Father. Thank you for throwing more light, and thank you for making our viewers understand the difference between the low and the high church. While you were speaking, I heard you mention incense. I'm sure most people from the low church background, like myself, do not understand why an Anglican church worships almost like a Roman Catholic church. And they see some high church with candles and incense and having altar servers and singing the mass. And I want to ask you, do you use candles and incense?
Yes.
And what do they symbolize in your worship?
Before we get there, what is the symbolism there? One thing that I need us to understand, it's not we worshiping like the Roman Catholic Church. The church as one has its own tradition. And it's not Roman, it's not Anglican, it's not Byzantine from the Orthodox Church. It's the tradition of the church. It's like you and I. You're from Nigeria and I'm from Haiti. And if I were to say, now that I'm in Haiti, those things were for Africa, but I'm no longer. Whether I'm in Haiti or in America or in Jamaica, these are traditions of our people.
Correct.
It makes no difference where we find ourselves. We don't let go of our culture or cultural tradition of what we learned from our forefathers and for our ancestors just because we're in a different.
So it's just the tradition of the church.
The church. Whether you are in the Church of England, or whether you're in Episcopal Church here in America, or in Nigeria,
or in any other church.
This is the tradition of the church that we embrace.
Thank you.
That is passed down to us from our ancestors in the faith.
Our tradition.
In the faith.
Correct.
So we hold on to the practices of the church that come down to from way back. We don't know how long but we know way back. That's how the church worshipped. And then we continue to keep the same, all to the glory of God.
Thank you, Father.
So, the incense, again, let me say a word about the incense. When you go to the Old Testament, the symbolism, or I believe it's Psalm 141. I believe it's Psalm 141. It says, talking about, let my prayer be before you like incense. And just that incense rises, we believe that the prayer is, so incense symbolizes to us the prayers that are rising up to God. Just as incense is rising before God and our prayers are rising. So there's the symbolism that we find right there in that, which means that from the Old Testament, the use of incense in worship is there. So we are denying ourselves part of who we are, because we call ourselves from the Judeo-Christian tradition, from Abraham. So a great deal of what we do has its roots in the Old Testament and on. The vestments that God ordained for Aaron to present himself before the Holy of Holies, to cover himself. So we have vestments as we go on the Lord's altar. From the same mindset. We're not just, Jesus said, we are in the gospel that we had for this past Sunday, which we had earlier today at our Mass, where Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, I did not come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill
the law.
Not one iota is to be taken out, is to be removed. So all these things that we see in the Old Testament, Jesus didn't come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So in Jesus we continue, but Jesus himself shows that he continued with the practice. He submitted himself to the practice of the Old Testament, but he fulfilled them at the same time. So it's not a rupture. We don't just cut away from.
Yeah. Thank you, Father. Viewers, it's been a wonderful interaction with Father Dove. He has exposed us to the meaning of Anglican Church and what its practices means, especially as it affects the Episcopal Church, and the Low Church, and all that. Thank you, and God bless you. We hope to see you again. Thank you, Father.
You're quite welcome. God bless you.